All right, welcome back. So we've been in the depths of Create React App misery. Maybe that's a good way of putting it. Just talking about assets and the pipeline, talking about how we work with CSS and images, modules, import, exports, and we haven't really made anything yet. So we're now going to do a little exercise, and I'm going to leave this up to you if you want to attempt this as an exercise or more as a code along sort of tutorial. It's going to be simple, nothing incredibly flashy, but the end result will look something like this, depending on how you style it, of course. So what we have, first of all, we're working with Pokemon. If you're not familiar with Pokemon, it's, I guess, a trading card game / video game / movie franchise, little creatures that you catch, and they have different statistics. And we're only working with a couple, the name, an image of a Pokemon, and then the type and their experience. So this is very simplistic. But what you're going to do is create an app called a Pokedex. So you'll have an app component, and then inside of that app component, you'll render a Pokedex. And your Pokedex is going to render a bunch of Poke cards. So each one of these is a Poke card. So let's just run through the basic specs. You'll have an app component, and it should render a single Pokedex to start. And it's not going to have much logic at all. So there's a note here that describes that. Pretty much, it's pretty standard to have your app component, the top level thing, just render another component. You're not going to have a bunch of ifs and else's. You might have some stuff, but it's usually pretty bleak in there. Then we'll talk about the Pokedex component. So the Pokedex component is basically going to manage all of the Poke cards. So a Poke card just has the details for a single Pokemon, name, image, and type, as well as experience. And there you can display them however you'd like. We'll talk about styling towards the end, so that's not as important. But basically, these are all props. So you pass in a name as a prop. You pass in the image source as a prop. You pass in the type, the experience. And it's coming from the Pokedex component. So to start you out, here is a good sort of default set of Pokemon. And you can use default props to have a default list of these Pokemon characters. So add this into your Pokedex as default props, and then you'll loop over all of these and create a new Poke card for each one. So you'll pass in name, type, and experience. And it's up to you how you actually want to pass that data. You could pass it all as an object at once, or you could pass them as individual props, like name and type and experience, or you could just call it data and pass it in an object. One really important thing, the way these images work. Each Pokemon has an ID, 1, 11, 12. I think they go up. I'm not sure how many there are today, but originally there was somewhere around, I don't know, like 200, I think. So each one has an ID, and there's this URL you can go to where you basically just put in the ID .png. So Pokemon/1.png is going to give you, I think this is Bulbasaur. It's been a while. So you put in that ID, like 13. What do we get? I think that's Weedle or something like that. Anyway, so you put in that number and you get the image back. So that's important. And at the beginning, this is all you need to create. There is a further study, sort of a challenge to this if you want, and I'll talk about that now, but this is all that you need to start with. So if we keep going down under further study, there's a couple of pieces. The first one is that there's a nicer place to get images, but there's a small problem with it. This nicer image API, it's not really an API, but this nice set of images, all of the IDs are supposed to be padded with zeros to 3 places. So instead of 1.png, they want 001.png. And 34.png is now 034. So you would need to write a function to help you do this. It's not that difficult, and you can Google it and find it, but you can't just take the direct ID like 4 and plug it in because it won't work. So instead, you need to write code to take that prop of 4, the ID, and turn it into 004. So this is 4.png, we don't get anything, and if I change it to 004, now we've got, what is that, Charmander, and it's a nicer asset, and that's what I used over here in this solution. So these aren't those pixelated sprites, but either one is fine. So then the next and larger challenge is to add a new component entirely called a Poke game. So it's really simple. It's not much of a game. But what happens is that you create this component called Pokegame, and it should take the list of Pokemon rather than the Pokedex. So Pokegame is going to render 2 different Pokedex components. So imagine these are playing cards originally. So this is one hand of playing cards, and this is another hand. and you're going to randomly assign 2 hands, so 4 to each. There's 8 total Pokemon in that array. And then what you're going to do is have some logic that is going to add up the total experience values, and then whichever one is calculated to have the higher total value will be the winning hand. So you'll display, if you want to do some green text, if you want to add, a winning animation, if you want to highlight them differently, put a border around them in green, however you want to display the fact that one hand has won and another has lost. So there's more detailed instructions if you want to just take a look. You'll define a Pokegame component, and it should render 2 Pokedex components, and each one will take 4 randomly assigned Pokemon pieces of data, and then they will each render 4 Pokecards. So inside of your Pokegame, it should calculate the total experience for each hand, and it should pass that total to the Pokedex. So there's some detailed instructions here. There's a lot of ways of structuring this, but if you want to just follow this, it will probably be easiest. Then the Pokegame component determines which one is the winner, and it's going to pass down a prop called isWinner or wins or is successful or whatever you want to call it. And so it will just be a prop that's passed down into the Pokedex, which really the Pokedex is now more like a Pokehand. But that's the basic structure. So we have Pokegame renders 2 different Pokedexes. Pokedex both render 4 Pokecards. And then there's the app component at the very, very top. And then finally, another challenge is to add some nice styling. So how do we do nice animations? What about making the cards flip over or transition? A nice one would be to have them sort of be dealt onto the page, like one at a time, show up. But you don't have to go nuts with it. This is more about the React side of things than the CSS. Okay, so if you want to try this on your own, I highly recommend at least trying to get to this part. But if you do want some help or you just want to watch me do it, then in the next video, I'm going to start with the basic version, and then afterwards, I'll upgrade it to look like this and add in the Pokegame. All right.